the most loyal guests are the ones that you recover successfully. And so we really have to focus in on that, on doing the little things to make an impact, get some branding into the properties. But then over communication seems like it's one of the only other avenues, is you communicate with guests enough without communicating too much, but make sure that they know you're there and that you're willing to take care of them. I think we all would strive to establish trust. That's really what we're all after, I think, is we want to capture the trust that guests have in us, because I think that's why they still stray towards a hotel versus a rental property, is they trust the experience. And if we can establish just as a group more trust from our guests, then they'll be a lot more willing to stay. But unfortunately, that comes down to, professionalism or a lack thereof.
You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Wil Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. Welcome back, Slick Talkers, and this week we're sitting down with Chris Wheeler, who is the co-founder and managing partner of Scenic Stays, a vacation rental management company with over 460 properties across the Southeast. With over 7 years in the industry and prior experience at Marriott and Hilton properties, Chris blends traditional hotel expertise with innovative vacation rental strategies. He has expanded Scenic Stays portfolio to include association management and on-site management of large resort complexes, focusing on exceptional guest experience and operational efficiency. Not only is Chris a legend and amazing guy to hang out with, he actually attended our first Good Morning retreat, which is part of my other podcast, Good Morning Hospitality. And we were at the Auburn University, the Laurel Hotel, which we had Horst Schultze, which you'll hear us talk about, the co-founder of Ritz-Carlton, speak to us and learn a lot about traditional hospitality. But Chris is actually also attending our second retreat, which you'll hear more later in the episode. So I hope you guys enjoy this podcast as much fun as I had. I hope you guys do too. This was a great conversation. So we're on to the episode and welcoming Chris Wheeler, co-founder and managing partner of Scenic Stays. Chris, long time no see, my friend. How are you doing post Puerto Rico?
I'm doing well. It feels like it's been days. So yeah, it's what a time though. Great time.
It has been days. I think I got back Saturday. We're recording on Tuesday. We got 3 days between seeing each other, but I'm thankful you're on the pod. For the listeners, our good friend Megan Moylan got married this weekend in Puerto Rico. It was a beautiful ceremony. If you haven't listened to her podcast in our network, Workflows and Espressos, she's awesome. And been talking about this wedding for so long. So it was cool to see you, Riley Goldman, Tanner Armstrong, Hunter and Ginger Harrelson, Lauren Valentine. The list can go on, right? Like we met so many people from the industry at the wedding. Obviously you were there and it was just a great time. Do you have a highlight from the Megan and Clark wedding, Puerto Rico experience?
It's hard to pick. That's a tough question, but I would say that reception is up there. I mean, that was really great. They did it up big, and it certainly was an extended time. You had plenty of time, so sure. It was great. It was great. The whole thing. Never been to Puerto Rico, so it's a great experience.
Yeah, and we all, I think we all won a little bit of money at the casino. I think maybe Hunter and Ginger, not so much from what I remember, but we all had a really good time. And the ceremony, the reception was awesome, very beautiful. But Chris, before we talk about Puerto Rico and the wedding, the whole episode, let's jump in. So, got to quickly introduce you to the audience, and I want to know kind of a transition and journey, right? You started in the hotel world like me. And this is something that we got to talk about in our pre-chat where it's very rare where it's people going from hotels to STR rather than STR to hotels. So I want to know the transition journey and what motivated your move from traditional hospitality roles at Marriott and Hilton to actually founding Scenic Stays, and then also bring in people like Lino, who with 24/7, forgive me if I'm butchering the name, but with Be Home 24/7, and bringing in partners and growing your guys' business. So kind of what motivated this transition for you?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I went to school at Auburn for hospitality, but it was primarily hotel and restaurant. The short-term rental business was not one I was familiar with, other than periodically just staying at properties, much like most of us kind of are introduced that way. So when I started out working in hotels, I wanted to work for a big brand like Marriott. I wanted to work for a brand like Hilton and get experience there. And I thought mistakenly, if once I jumped into the short-term world, that it would be very similar. I thought, hey, this is going to be the same thing. And how wrong was I? So much so that I started on Memorial Day weekend. And I thought, there can't be too many differences here. And quickly I found out that there was a world of difference. I mean, there's actually more differences than similarities to the two. So it's interesting. It's definitely interesting chatting with you beforehand about how, the transition to short term kind of makes you, in a way, want to go back. But it's been really, I've had the great benefit of working with a lot of really good people. So I would say more than anything, I'm lucky. Marriott was a great brand to learn under, and the leadership I had there was second to none. The culture there was second to none. And so when you fast forward to, like you mentioned, partnerships, like I'm blessed to have with people like Lino, that culture is still the same. That's the consistent. That's the theme. The people, the culture, the teamwork. That's really what still resonates in one of the cornerstones of our business still. But along the way, I got to work for large brands in the short-term world, like Southern Vacation Rentals, like Sterling.
Yeah,
it's where I was exposed to everything. I was given autonomy to make mistakes. I was able to learn from great mentors and work with good people that are still in the industry. And that kind of led me down the path of pursuing a little more autonomy with a company like Scenic. And I think that's really been one of the themes too, is culture, teamwork, but then autonomy, seeking a little bit more freedom and flexibility to make mistakes and learn and try and build things up independently. Because one of the interesting things I found when I started at Southern, it's a great company. It was built really well. There's a ton of great people that were there. And I stepped in and I thought, how are things like this? I'd come from Marriott. Everything's very like straight and narrow systems and everything. And then it doesn't take long to look around when you're kind of building up inventory to say, I understand completely how there's just messes everywhere. You just kind of 100%. Put Band-Aids on things and build it to where you're just kind of getting by at a certain point. And you're like, how did people not screw this up more? Which I guess they do. But it's been really interesting. I think one of the biggest mistakes I made transitioning from hotels to rentals was that I thought it'd be very similar, and it's just so different.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I was the same. I was like, I could start a property management company. I manage hotels. This is easy. I'm just going to add some smart locks to this bad boy and get rid of the front desk and do all this stuff, right? And before we get into your Scenic Stays evolution, I kind of want to touch on the topic of entrepreneurship, because coming from you went to school in Auburn, which kind of a backstory for some of the listeners. We hosted our first Good Morning retreat at the Auburn University for hospitality at the Laurel Hotel, which was an incredible experience. Michelin rated restaurant. You walk up at check-in and they know you by name without even saying, checking in, like every other hotel front desk agent. So it was such a great experience, and you were there with us. But I'm curious, you go into school, you work with these companies, big brands, even people and brands in the vacation rental side. Where does the entrepreneurial drive come from you? Were your parents entrepreneurial? Have you had entrepreneurial experiences in the past? I'm curious, like, what really made you want to take that leap in going in on your own rather than continuing the path of a career within a company that's already established?
Yeah, it's a good question. I didn't grow up with. Well, I say that my dad had an entrepreneurial spirit, and he set out on his own. He does graphic design, and my mom was a teacher, still is a teacher, and she's an excellent teacher. And I think those two factors are big contributions. He's excellent in graphic design. He's an excellent hard worker, and he set out on his own and did a really created a good business for himself. And my mom being a teacher, that's really what you do a lot of the times. You build the business, but then you become a teacher. And that's, I would only wish to be as good as she is at what she does. But their foundation was hard work. I think that was a big piece of what they taught me, was being really hard workers. And so that's one of the things that I kind of, as I navigated working for companies and then setting out and trying to build, hard work was really where I sought to kind of separate myself and be a little different. Because jumping from a hotel into the vacation rental industry, I thought, I don't know a lot about what I'm doing. And so I've got to kind of learn on the job. But if I can outwork everybody, and if I can find what other people aren't really good at or doing right now, maybe I can make a difference. And so that kind of navigated me through my experiences. And then, I think we all know you hit a ceiling at a certain point. Within companies, there's this ability to grow your inventory, but then you hit a ceiling at a certain point. And again, I was really lucky to work with different people, different companies. I had the opportunity to learn a lot of different things. I learned at Southern rates, revenue, leading team. I learned ops, and then at Sterling, I got to look behind the curtain and see P&Ls and work with people who are really good at financials and learn how that worked and how to really manage your expenses and things like that, to where I felt set up for success at a certain point too. But even as successful as I felt like I could be, it's at a certain point, you need mentors. You need, in my opinion, you need partners. Needed people like Lino and my partners, Ann and Ron, because they're exceptional at things that I'm not. And so I think my hope is, one thing that I continue to try to be good at is understanding my ignorance, because that's one thing from the start. Is I look back, I think I have made the dumbest mistakes known to man. But it's at least if I know I'm ignorant about things, that I can find people who are much better at me. I'm like, well, with accounting, I'm the most useless person in the accounting department whatsoever. If I have to do anything in there, we've all got problems. And so, that's not something I need to mess with whatsoever. And so I think, I kind of try and understand my niche, my role, where I need to stay within, and then what other people are going to be better at.
This episode is brought to you by Hostfully. You made it 10 minutes in, probably give or take a couple of minutes if I'm wrong on the time placement based on my producers, but you have made it through 10 minutes. And we want to tell you about Hostfully, our amazing partners who provide great technology solutions for vacation rental management companies just like you. You can grab the link in the show notes to get a special offer, but look, you need to diversify the distribution channels. So get with them to get on Airbnb and Vrbo and Homes and Villas by Marriott if you can qualify. There are so many great connectivity partners in their marketplace that you really just need to take advantage of. So grab the link, tell them that Wil sent you, and of course, make sure that you let them know I sent you. So use the code, use the link, and of course, we're back to the episode with Chris Wheeler. I was going to say, with the mustache like yours, I would find it hard to believe that you're bad at accounting and finance. Like, dude, you seem like you know some numbers. That's for sure. It's killer mustache for
to a degree, not accounting numbers. I know rates and revenue, and I know sales numbers. But when I start getting, that's why I've got some of the shadow. So I'm not completely full mustache. I've got I'm on both sides of the door there.
Yeah, for the people listening and not watching the YouTube version, go check out the YouTube version. You got to see it. It's the best mustache in the industry. I'm going to put that claim on you, just FYI. Oof. So next conference or whatever, people are going to know.
That's big. That's a lot of pressure. I mean, I don't know. I hope I'd start to see some company, though, with the mustache. I wouldn't mind a few other people in the arena.
Trying to join you, but I got to keep the beard, too. I got a double chin I'm trying to hide, so just definitely gotta.
There's no story behind that either. It just was there one day. There's no, I just kind of up and did it.
Hey, I think every guy kind of sits back and looks at themselves in the mirror one day and is like, you know what? I should try facial hair. I know I've got stubble, but how far can I take this? That was me, at least. I was like, all right, I got to see.
Well, you remember in the hotel world, you couldn't do the facial hair. You couldn't do a mustache. And you had to be clean cut and, well shaven and everything. So I couldn't have dreamt of the day that I could walk around with a mustache.
I know. I was in the military before hotels, and I was like, well, I guess I just have to keep it clean shaven. And I was younger back in my hotel days, so I, didn't have all the chubbiness and, aging parts of my face where I was like, all right, I'm fine without facial hair. Yeah. Anyways, without going down too far the rabbit hole for all the listeners, okay, let's get back to Scenic Stays. So the evolution, I want to walk through how Scenic Stays grew from managing single family homes to then overseeing even a more diverse portfolio, including resort style properties. I know you and I have talked about your condominiums and the certain kind of resort esque inventory as you guys have really scaled your company. And I'm sure, like you said, partnerships like Lino and your other partners who I'm sorry I forgot their names, but really come in and really help enhance that operational efficiency. So walk us through that. And actually, scrap that. I have another question I wanted to ask you first, and I got distracted by the mustache and the beard comment. But when getting from hotels into short-term rentals, like you said, you made a lot of mistakes thinking like it was so similar. I made that mistake when it came to the technology. I was like, okay, the hotel technology is horrible. Using programs like Marsha or Opera or whatever was just a really, really poor experience. And I was like, why do we have to live like this, especially as a front desk agent? And getting into the short-term rental side, the technology is very similar as functionality, but very different as it's cloud-based. It's a little bit quicker, less 1995 Windows desktop looking UX, UI, that type of stuff. Did you have an interesting transition with your technology stack and setting up your actual operation when it came to, because I'm sure you're like, I know I need a PMS, I know I need channel management, I know I need this, right? What was that transition like before we get into the actual growth of Scenic?
Yeah, there's some beauty behind the hotel systems. It's very simple. Sure. You don't have a mouse. You're just navigating it through the black screen with the green font. There's some beauty in the simplicity there. But it seems like after years of using different different tech in general, but property management systems, I had the benefit of seeing Track pretty early on and seeing how it progressed. I'd seen V12, I had seen Escapia. And so for me at first, it was kind of, let's use the easiest interface and let's simplify the tech and then have that grow. And in hindsight, that's probably something where, to me, the benefit would be to go back and try a little bit more right on the onset with more tech. Because there was a lot that was very, very overly manual. It's one of those things where with so much technology and all the marketing resources now, I tell people sometimes, if you saw the resources that I used and the manual things I put together at front, you would blush. It was disgusting. It just was the ugliest thing you could ever imagine. So now people spit out this wonderful material and I'm like, I hope no one ever sees those again. Those are awful. And so I think it's a real area that people still probably have a challenge if they're setting out, is they don't think much about tech. They think about just the simplest form, the least path of resistance, where if I could go back, start out with the tools, start out and test them from day one, so that way you have a better knowledge, because it's a little harder to take a big ship and navigate it than one of those, if you're a small, kind of more efficient vessel, you can turn pretty quickly. So day one, not much tech at all. We used Escapia and from that, very manual. And it was a big learning curve. And that's where people kind of to your first question, that's where, when we changed the model or kind of adapted to a resort style model, it's extremely beneficial to have people who are the best in the business at that model. The partners you mentioned, Lino, but Ron Whitfield and Bollinger, they're the best in the business at it. And so they know the tech needed. They know what is the requirement of that style. And it was beneficial because it forced me to go from manual to more tech. And I think that's probably a big plateau that a lot of companies reach when they hit 20, but certainly 50, 60 properties is if you're manual, if you're still using group text, if you're still managing properties with, whatever calendar you're using and you're not setting rates with tech, then you've got a problem and you've got to adjust. And the longer you wait, the harder it is to reset that. So it was very interesting. It was very, very manual, very tedious, very inefficient. It kind of goes back to, the hard work thing, but hard work when you're not kind of being efficient and driving towards the right purpose is really useless. And so my hard work was just banging my head against the wall. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I get the feeling, and, obviously forgetting that you had experiencing the technology in the vacation rental sector prior to fully going into Scenic. But now let's walk through, the diversification of your guys' portfolio, because, I've had many friends and mentors in business outside of the industry and inside the industry talk about riches and niches, right? Stick to one, don't diversify too much. Obviously, that can kind of come with a grain of salt because you guys have a diverse portfolio. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because it's obviously proven to be a shift and change for you guys at Scenic. So I'm curious for the listeners that, are also operators and entrepreneurs and trying to, do this as well. I'm sure they're probably like, well, I was told to just stick in one lane and do this one thing. And yeah, I would love to know what your overall thoughts with your guys' actual business application.
I think there's a lot of value to that. I think there's a lot of value to sticking to what you know and do what you know and just be really good at it and stick to those things that you know and excel at it. At the same time, how difficult is it to turn down opportunities? And that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. And so the intention originally was not to even do condos and homes. It was just to do homes, to do properties that were very similar. And I didn't have the ability to say no, as many people. I didn't have that discipline. And then these opportunities for resort style management came about. I think the key is recognizing that they are different, and it's kind of submodels within your overarching parent company. And so they have to be managed differently. You have to look at the financials differently. You have to look at the team and the structure differently and see the value and the efficiencies because they're there. But as you get into the minutia, understand they can't function the same way. It's almost internally creating sub-brands. And I think there's a lot of value in creating a guest-facing sub-brand as well, because I've seen that done and I've seen it effective and not so effectively done. So, I think there's a lot of value in sticking to what you know. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of value to just saying, look, this is a big opportunity. Let's not let it go to waste. Let's not turn down opportunities, because if you have good people or if you have good intuition or if you're kind of intelligent, you can figure it out, I think. And if you've still got, I think one of the big challenges that you'd see from an entrepreneur trying to pivot or trying to take on a new model is keeping the entrepreneurial spirit alive. Because if you see that growth and scale and lose the spirit that got you there, you're just going to become some other random company. I mean, our industry is flooded with companies and competition and the low barrier to entry. But if you can keep the entrepreneurial spirit going, I think that's really what's going to help you be successful. And that's what owners want. That's what our partners want.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, talking about the right opportunities, right? Because we're all presented with opportunities every day. I am with my business. I know you are with yours, as you've stated, and many people listening. Do you have a criteria for what classifies that is a good opportunity to actually take action on? Do you have a process on what you kind of do to vet those? Because I know for myself, I had to go through a lot of bad opportunities, right? Where it was like, oh, this is going to be a great opportunity. It's going to be big. And the entrepreneurial spirit was very much driving that decision. But then in reality, you're like, oh, I shot myself in the foot with that. So do you have a criteria with that? Or I'm very curious on your process.
Yeah, it's different, and it's different for like a large group, a large property versus just an individual property. But I think both need some sort of vetting process. So if we're looking at a single family home, there's a lot of value to saying no, and just in general, the value of saying no. I learned that, but only because people with more experience were able to tell me that no was the right answer. I remember this was probably in the peak of the COVID boom. We had an opportunity, and I was hell bent on saying this is a good opportunity. We should do this. And overwhelmingly though, no was the answer. And looking back, it would have been a really bad deal. But it's only because those with more experience than me said, no, this is not a good idea. And so I think the idea of a mentor or mentors or people with experience, there's a lot of gold in that. They say youth is wasted on the young because that experience only comes with age. And so if you could combine that experience with that spirit of driving and doing and moving forward, that would be very beneficial. But even a single family home, there's somewhat of a formula to it, but I think there's so much you've got to just have experience and trust your gut on too. If we know a property, and if I look back and see the properties that left us or we asked to leave the program, I remember when I look back and think, in my gut, I knew this was a bad choice. This was not a good idea. Because that's kind of that, you can't quantify some of those experiences. You can't quantify the fact that you had 5 conversations and those conversations were constantly devolving down a bad road and you hadn't even signed a contract yet. And I think that's particularly true. It's interesting on the resort style side though, because that typically is in association with the board and the association piece of it. I'm not great with that. That's where my partners are much better at navigating the politics of it, because the individual wants of a particular owner or even a subset of owners has to take a sidestep to the larger good of the complex. And so when you're navigating a board, you have to see if the board is going to be supportive. You have to see if those board members are going to be on your side and help push you in the program, because that's a big determining factor if you're going to be successful. But I think that does translate to an individual property. If that owner is going to be a partner, or if that owner is going to be not so much a partner, they're going to see you as someone that they're just hiring as a person to rent their property. Because I think that's apparent if you really try and let it be. But it's really goes back to the value of just saying no. And I still lose that internal dialogue where I'm like, I can make it work. I can figure it out. It's failed 5 times in the last year and a half, but I'll be the one. I'll be the guy. And I'm not the guy.
I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy.
I'm not that guy. I thought I was, but I'm not.
Yeah.
So
very, very well spoken. And well said. I think that's really good advice and a good way to approach it, especially because it's not just like inventory opportunities, it's business opportunities. It's going into a joint venture or doing this or doing that, right? Like there's so many opportunities that go. And I think that's a good thing because, I think about the gut reaction too, right? Like the gut usually is right. Like I would say it's a minor chance that it's really wrong, where maybe it's a little like fight or flight situation kind of gut reaction. But yeah, that's very well said. Very well spoken.
But I feel like you've almost got to develop that gut a little bit too. You've got to have some bumps and bruises. And one of the mentor ideas that I think is valuable is I always think of a mentor like somebody that's like a couple decades ahead of you. There's a lot of good mentors that are your peers or just people that are in the too. It's like, misery loves company. That's always got a bad connotation to it. But I think that's a good thing.
Sure.
You do want to kind of know you're going through the struggles with other people and that they're seeing it too. But, you can develop that gut by bouncing things off of other people. And a lot of time they may have experienced it already. And so that's the value of also going to, it's great to interact with people at conferences or masterminds or all these deals or what y'all are doing in Auburn and now the next one. Those are great opportunities to learn and have the sessions, but then what happens in between is a lot of times the magic too, because you can talk to people about what they've been going through and it translates a lot.
All right. You're halfway through the episode and we've talked a little bit about our retreats, as you heard in the intro, plus Chris and I talking about it in this episode. If you are listening and you are a property manager who's really wanting to build a great brand, we have amazing people attending our next retreat, January 13th to the 15th at Bolt Farm Treehouse. Now, I've had Seth and Tori both on the podcast to discuss their evolution of Bolt Farm, and it's incredible. Now we're going to get to experience it for the first time in real life, and we're bringing along our listeners of Good Morning Hospitality and Slick Talk. So go to goodmorningretreats.com to share any interest that you may have of this retreat. We are doing it in January. It's our winter edition for Good Morning Retreats. We're going to do 2 retreats a year that are publicly announced and advertised, and we want the best of the best. The theme of this year is building a brand in hospitality, from building a brand for yourself as a business owner, building a brand of your actual business that could potentially be acquired or continue to evolve in offering great hospitality. So don't miss out on this opportunity. I'm telling you, these retreats have been so game-changing for us, not only because we're hosting them, but because we're getting the right people in the right room. And I want you to be one of those persons or people. So grab the link in the show notes, Good Morning Retreats. And of course, share an interest, register on the page. There's no pay right out the gate. We do want to make sure we're bringing the right people. So share any interest, DM me, shoot me an email, grab me on LinkedIn if you're interested. Check out the link, and we hope to see you at our next Good Morning Retreat. Now back to the episode. You're 100% on the money, because I think that's not only why Michael Golden and I, thought about the retreat idea, but even with each other, we're business partners on a couple different ventures with our podcast and with our coffee. But, entrepreneurship is really, really hard. And I know it gets glamorized a lot. Even I might even be guilty of glamorizing it on the show. But, when you're going through it, and especially as a solo founder, as you experienced prior to bringing in partners, it can be almost a silo of, you feel just constantly like hitting your head against the wall. You don't know how to break through. You don't have anyone to vet ideas through or verbally process. And, getting that good confidant, like, again, Michael and I talk every day. And when he's going through it, I'm there. When I'm going through it, he's there. It's a good system to really unisolate yourself. I think we can get very isolated, especially if you're trying to be heads down and building. Rather than being on LinkedIn or Instagram and glamorizing this like facade of business and entrepreneurship. And so I think you very much well said that. Like, that's very well said. For management models, I know a lot of listeners on the show have seen the different types of management models throughout the years, from master lease or arbitrage to co-hosting and commission focused type models, single family resort stuff. All this stuff. What challenges have you guys encountered with managing distributed inventory versus centralized? And this was brought up in Auburn, kind of why I wanted to bring it up with you. Distributed inventory being homes spread out throughout a city or multiple cities versus centralized on-site models such as your resorts. And how have you guys navigated that?
It was a good question, and we talked about this before. I was so excited to hear the answer in Auburn, because I was like, "This is the solution. Like, pen ready. I'm done. Yeah, we're going to solve it right here." And there still wasn't a good solution, and particularly that's another aspect of coming from hotels. You saw it too, where I always feel like there's still something lacking. There's something to be desired. You don't. Oftentimes, the biggest opportunity that we have with a guest is recovery. When I first started, that was a big learning curve. At a certain point, I got to where I was like, the ideal situation is we don't see them, talk to them, nothing. We have no idea they existed. And it's like, well, is that a good experience or not? And it turns out it's potentially not, because there's no repetition there. They don't even know who they stayed with. You're still VRBO to them. So I think it's still an ongoing challenge. How do you make your mark? How do you, when you're distributed and decentralized and versus centralized, even then there's just efficiencies that you're missing, where you wish you could deliver the utmost service, and you wish you could even deliver service to a degree that you're pigeonholed by when you're on this partnership model versus one owner for a lot of properties. And so I think ultimately it does a lot of times come down to the recovery times. It's a lot of times too, and I think there's statistics that prove that the most loyal guests are the ones that you recover successfully. And so we really have to focus in on that, on doing the little things to make an impact, get some branding into the properties. But then over communication seems like it's one of the only other avenues, is you communicate with guests enough without communicating too much, but make sure that they know you're there and that you're willing to take care of them. I think we all would strive to establish trust. That's really what we're all after. I think is we want to capture and the trust that guests have in us, because I think that's why they still stray towards a hotel versus a rental property, is they trust the experience. And if we can establish just as a group more trust from our guests, then they'll be a lot more willing to stay. But unfortunately, that comes down to, professionalism or a lack thereof. And so, our thing is it's not always financially advantageous to take care of a guest or to take care of an owner for that matter. But if you establish that trust or you keep doing the things you need to, I think you'll get there. It's just that's not always the case. And so in the grand scheme of things, even if one guest seems like that you'll never hear from them again, but you did the right thing, you took care of them, you may never hear from them again, but you're exercising that muscle where you're just taking care of someone versus leaving them in the dust. And I think so a lot of times I think it comes down to if you can practice good service recovery, or if you can just manufacture an experience or a moment. It doesn't have to be something earth-shattering or groundbreaking, but can you even create an opportunity to make a memory with a guest? Because that's powerful, and a lot of times that'll stick with them versus they just had this random booking in some random area and they'll never be back again.
Yeah. So much good stuff right there. It's so true, because it does make a difference. And I think so much of the industry during COVID got so focused on automate, autopilot. Let's crank this. We're growing, right? That gold rush was so exciting, and technology is innovating, and funding is coming in from venture and private equity and, all this stuff. And then also in hospitality is thrown out the window, right? Like you're like, oh, I've scaled and grown so much. My guest scores are down. My team satisfaction is down, but our inventory is up, our RevPAR is up, our occupancy is up. But yeah, all that kind of got thrown out the door. Do you, not to keep going back into this like hotel, blend kind of conversation, but you mentioned earlier in the episode, like obviously you said you made a lot of mistakes. So assuming that going from hotels to short-term rentals is just going to be so easy. But I do think there's a lot to learn, as you made just the point right now, like, professionalization or standardization, even with the customary piece, right? Like vacation rentals are very unique. They're not all the same. They're not cookie cutter like a Courtyard by Marriott or a Hilton Garden Inn is, right? Like they're all very much the same. And so how do you view the blending of the vacation rental industry and hotel? Because I know a lot of operators like us started hotels, go into STR, and a lot of STR operators are now going into boutique hotels. Conversations I've had with Jamie Lane and other people on this pod. How do you see it? Do you think we can establish a standardization within vacation rentals further than white linens and a fully stocked kitchen? Like, do you think there's a better standardization piece? Ashley at In Haven, shout out to her for creating a lot of standardization and processes around kitchen, bed, and bathroom. I think it's really, really good core focus for a lot of us. But yeah, I want your on the ground experience, because you guys have quite a bit of inventory, both single family and condo. So I'll stop rambling and I'll let you speak.
Well, I think one thing that a lot of times everybody's guilty of is projecting their experience onto our guests. So you hear it from a rate perspective of we should be booking. Well, does the data support that or not? Or this is how I booked my trip, so this is what everybody wants. And instead, I think we just have to keep listening to guests and look at feedback, look at what guests are searching for consistently and hone in on those. And I agree. People like Ashley are doing a fantastic job of, and hopefully more get on board with that minimum standard of providing a comfortable sleep experience, comfortable linens, and a good set of housewares. But I would say one area that could provide that minimum level of service that everyone would strive to achieve is communication. And so you have to use technology to get there. But you think of all these experiences you have with different aspects of your life where you get constant updates, you get constant communication, you always feel like you're in the know. So if you go to your vacation rental and then the communication is just silent, you don't get a lot prior to your stay. Maybe you have an opportunity with a maintenance issue and you never hear, and the maintenance guy showed up, but you have no idea. That communication level, I think, is one way to establish another standard level of service that is extremely inconsistent. You hate to see these random bad Airbnb experiences because that ruins it for everybody. You see all the time somebody had a randomly bad experience on a third-party platform, and they say they'll never be back to that platform again. And a lot of times it comes down to a lack of communication. So even if you've got great linens, even if you've got great housewares, even if the bed's comfortable and you've got a minimum standard of comfort level on the furnishings, if your communication sucks, they're never going to be back. So, but that one's tougher because everybody's different. You can standardize linens and put the same ones on everything, and it's a hard product. Whereas the communication, you're dealing with every walk of life, every type of person, and you're certainly dealing with some pains in the asses. So, but it's also, if everything was easy, we wouldn't have jobs. There would be not a need for our industry if it was easy and perfect. It's kind of like we've got to deal with those issues and we've got to deal with those nuances. So, I mean, to me, it's communication. It's keeping guests in the loop, and it's making sure you call them if there's a 2-hour delay in the maintenance technician, or you call them if there's something wrong prior to their stay, instead of just saying, sorry about your luck, and then you go silent and they get locked out and they don't hear from anybody for a day or something like that. That's a minimum level of service that if it's absent, everything else could be perfect, and it all goes to hell if that's gone.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And I always think back, the early Marriott days of being front desk and even like transitioning to supervisor or whatever like role in leadership. I was always like, okay, one of my awesome managers back in the day always kind of told me, he's like, Will, because I would get so frustrated when a guest would come to me mad, right? Like I'm like, oh, like how could we mess this up? Like how could housekeeping do this? Or why was the restaurant like, why am I getting yelled at for valet? Like valet messed up something. It wasn't my fault. Like, right. All that stuff goes through my head, and I would constantly kind of get to that point where then not react the best, because guess what, we're all humans. So as much as a hospitality guy I am, I'm sure there was some bad guest experiences out there that I've created. And the good shift that I took and I kind of started applying with our property management business, I want your take on this too, is like, what opportunities can we create today? Whether they're, if a good thing happens, great. What opportunity can we make from that? How can we enhance that? How can we make that guest feel better? How can we communicate better with them, and showing our appreciation that they stayed with us, right? To also, like, if a bad experience happens, the guest walks in on a dirty unit, or the cleaning team is late and getting the unit turned over, or door code, doesn't work, battery dies, blah, blah, blah. What opportunity can you take from that? How can you make that a better experience? And how can you really enhance that and just see it's not a problem. It's actually an opportunity for you to make some good. And I want your take on that, because I think that mentality can be so hard when you get beaten down so constantly. You could be in person at a front desk or a virtual guest communications team member and still get beaten down. It's a very unspotlighted part of our industry. But yeah, I would love to know how your thoughts are on that, and like where it kind of even goes into a two-parter that I want to kind of queue up for you in scaling, right? Because when you're scaling to the property size that you guys are at with the amount of inventory you manage, communication can get harder and harder. And I think finding that opportunity is becoming more of a challenge. So yeah, we'd love your take.
Yeah, I think it also, not to oversimplify it, but it kind of goes back to listening to the guest needs, because you're exactly right. When somebody is chewing you out, and I mean, you've had it, I've had it, I have had myself. I mean, man, if I could go back, it's rough. I mean, you laugh about it now, but
we need to pour a drink for the episode on that one.
I know. Well, one time I had to call a lady, and she was so upset. She was like, "I'm going to pour a cocktail while I'm talking to you. I'm so mad." I was like, "Please do. Please. I wish I could make one for you, because this is the tough one." I was like, "This is going to get better, I promise." But I think you listen too. You listen to what's really important to them, because you're right. A lot of times you're getting chewed on and they're just taking it out on you. But if you listen hard enough, perhaps you can find what's really wrong. And it's not always, I think the easy button there is, well, we'll give you 10% off. Well, that's not very personal, right? Or we'll give you a discount. And sometimes that's all you can do. That sometimes you're not going to make everyone happy, and that's fine. But I think the solution would be, listen to what's the actual issue. If they're there for a lot of times it's a major event. We're here because it's a birthday, it's an anniversary or whatever. Or sometimes it's even a more serious event. This is maybe our last time here as a family. And so if you listen to that and say, "God, like, what can I do that's more personal here that would mean a lot more than $200? If I deliver something to them that's meaningful." I think that's really important. And some of our team is really empowered to try and do that. And I think you've got to do that too. You've got to allow the frontline team members to make a decision and take action, because the last thing you want is to be pissed off, to chew on somebody, and then you got to get passed to somebody else, and you got to chew on the next person, and eventually you're just tired and you're like, somebody just do something, and then a lot of times it's not even the one that's giving you the ass chewing, it's the other person that they've got to go back to. So one example of one of our team members did an excellent job of this. We had construction issues bound to happen, right? And the pool was not accessible. So at first it was just a matter of, let's just give guests a discount. Let's give them an advanced discount. And that's sufficient on a base level. But Emily decided, well, people need to use the beach. The beach is the thing right now. We don't have a pool. There's construction. So she offered a package deal where they got a free beach setup. And I mean, it was very well received. It's a very creative way to say, here's something that's a solution, but it's a solution that you wouldn't have normally gotten. The discount wouldn't have allowed you to book a setup, but we're going to include it for you. And that's a really good option that's personalized. We have so many different things that can go wrong with this industry and with our properties. But I think if you just listen and figure out what's important to somebody, you can make a more educated decision on how to recover them, as opposed to just saying, we're just going to give you 10, 15, 20% off, and that's it. Now, I will say the benefit of having a resort style property is you have more resources. That's the same as a hotel. If it's important to them that something involving food and beverage, you've got a restaurant right there. You don't always have that now. You have to go seek it elsewhere. You have to go find out a way. So I like, gift cards are simple things, or delivering flowers, or dropping them something off that's important to them if you can find it. I would love to see, our ability to keep a guest portfolio continue to be enhanced to the degree that a hotel has. And I think it would be cool if at some point we could reach a level where people are comfortable with guest information being potentially shared in a non-invasive way, where we can provide guests a similar experience. And we can do some really cool things with guest arrivals, but it doesn't always have to be expensive. I found that with owners too, when it's their anniversary, and they'll let it slip that it's their anniversary, and they'll leave them flowers or something. I mean, they're blown away, and they love that, and that's not expensive. I think you can do it proactively too, if particularly on the owner side, because I think it's natural for people to pick the chicken or the egg, the owner or the guest. If you do it on the owner side, you say something's broken at the property. It would cost us $200. We know they've had problems. They've had 2 problems with the property so far. Just fix it. Tell them you fixed it for free, and move on. And I think that gives you a lot of mental equity with that owner that you didn't have before. So I don't know, maybe not a great answer, but I think it just helps to listen, because you're right. So many times they're fired up and you've got to let them go. Like, they need a dog to kick. And a lot of times that's what, as property managers, we're the dog. You come home at the end of the day, you need a dog to kick. We're the dog. So we're going to get kicked. That's for sure.
Quick disclaimer for all the listeners: do not go home and kick your dogs.
No, I'm not supporting that. Yeah, I'm not supporting that. We're not the kicker. We're the kicky in that situation.
Yeah, 100%. Well, it's such a good point. I even heard a story recently, where if you empower your team to do the right thing, because doing the right thing is always the right thing, right? Like that saying is always true. And I think we try to control a lot of it when it comes to guest communication and decision making on recovery or enhancement of moments. I heard a cool story when a pool wasn't working, and the guests confirmed before getting there, they just landed. It was like, hey, just want to confirm, we're here with our kids. We want to make sure the pool is clean and ready to go and heated because it's cold. Guest, communication team says, yep, 100%, it's ready, blah, blah, blah. They get there, it's dirty, it's cold, it's not clean, it's not ready. And the recovery could have been, oh yeah, we'll just give you whatever. We'll give you 50% off because the pool's not working and that's the whole reason why you're there. So I guess we'll give you 50%, but we have to cover something, right?
Yeah.
That could have been the normal response. But instead, the neighborhood where this home was in a HOA that was pretty much designed for short-term rentals. And so with all the other vacation homes in the same neighborhood being empty, they go on, the reservation agent goes on Swimply and books the pool maybe a couple of houses down. That's actually way better. It's got a hot tub, it's got the fountain, the toys, all the good stuff, and just calls the guest and says, hey, look, we know we messed up, but guess what? Our neighbor down the road is also a vacation rental. It's empty for the weekend. We just booked the pool for you. You have full access. There you go. Hope like that helps. And that was actually a really cool story to hear, because it's not just the initiative to actually do the right thing, but I think if you empower your team to know what's out there in the market, it's not just Airbnb, it's not just these other things. Uber Eats and Uber Delivery is actually a great tool if you're dispersed and very spread out and can't get someone to deliver. Like there's so many pieces of information, or not information, but technology at our fingertips that we could really do stuff. Call your favorite restaurant in the market, get a gift card. Make sure it's an e-gift card so you can just send it to them on a message and like, here's the QR code or whatever, right? Like those things do make a huge difference. And I love the advice, just listen. I think when, I'm guilty of this in relationships, I'm guilty of this with my family. Like sometimes I listen to respond, and, the podcast is a great tool for me to listen to, actually hear and not just to talk and respond back. So I think that's such a great piece of advice. Especially for the listeners who probably feel like they've been kicked a lot as a dog.
Well, that's when it's toughest. One thing that drives me nuts is you'd see these things that say, be nice. It's the easiest thing you can do. I disagree completely. It's the hardest thing you can do. It's so much easier when you're getting kicked and yelled at to just be like, screw this. You get nothing. Sorry, if you would have been nice, I would have helped you, but you get nothing. It's human nature. But you're right. I mean, that's a wonderful example, because having kids, if I show up and my daughters don't get to swim, it doesn't matter. I could have it for free. It doesn't matter. They want to swim. And so if you can figure out a way to replace that, and even perhaps, like you said, make it better, I mean, you're that person who was the point of contact who reached out. They had, if you can just empathize rather than sympathize, empathize, try and put yourself in those shoes and say, what's in the background? Who's chirping in their ear right now that's causing them this? And, if you say, I've got 2 kids, and if that happened, it would be the end of the world. We might as well fly back right now. It really does allow you to kind of make a better decision, or at least in that case, let's say you don't find a pool. At least you let them know, look, I tried. I've searched for the last 2 hours and I just can't find anything. What would make it better? What can I help with? How can I make this better for you?
Yeah.
As opposed to, like you said, the easy thing, and maybe even quote unquote right thing, would be, we'll give you 50% back. The pool, we quantify the pool to 25, 30% of your revenue. Sure, we'll give you 30% back or whatever. But that's not taking care of them. I guarantee that would not have left them with a great feeling. They would have thought, I would have done anything to have a property with a pool. So, I mean, that's just a really great example.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. And I'm glad we were able to talk about it on the show, because I was like, man, that's such a creative way, like to recover. I think that was such a cool story to hear. I don't know how many others really share experiences like that publicly, on platforms like X or LinkedIn or other, mediums like podcasts. So yeah, really cool to hear how people can get creative. And I love what you just said. It really does. If you look at the environment, look at the background,
it's just creativity. It's the perfect word for it. It's just creativity. And can you think outside the box and do something a little different? Just, even if it takes a little longer, think about what you can do differently to make that experience better, rather than just the cookie cutter, give them a percentage off or a future discount, you're done. It goes back to, your question about a resort style atmosphere. Their solutions are very creative. And so if you needed inspiration, you could even go to a book or a resource where they talk about some of what they've done for recovery. You hear the famous examples from the Reds where they build a boardwalk for someone so that they can access the beach, or they do all these crazy things, but that doesn't make sense financially for them, but they did it. And I think in the long run, people still talk about it. So creativity is the word. It's how it goes. But with anything, not even recovery, just be creative about it. That's everything.
Yeah, we both got to hear from Horst Schulze about the crazy stories, and him saying, and for the listeners, Horst Schulze is one of the co-founders of Ritz-Carlton, so kind of a big deal in the sense of hearing about the chandeliers are nice, but that's not the service. They're not there for the chandeliers. They're not there for the sofa in the lobby that maybe they'll sit on if they're waiting for their spouse to come down or whatever, right? Like it's that, none of that matters. It's really the actual attention to detail when it comes to executing the service and executing the hospitality beyond just a bedroom and a place to, get ready for the day or, to sleep at night. So yeah, it's really good point. Chris, we are running up on our normal episode length time, and I want to continue to talk to you. So we're definitely going to get you back on the podcast, but I want to kind of like wrap this up with maybe a final thought and a bow for the episode and listeners tuning in right now. Kind of industry outlook. I know you get to hear a lot. You go to the conferences, you go to the retreats, you invest in the partnerships. You're part of the 100 collection. So you're hearing a lot. I want to know what's your kind of overall pulse on the industry moving forward as we're getting ready for holidays and then 2025 right around the corner.
I like the way 2025 looks from the revenue and ADR perspective. It certainly seems like it seems like everybody's had a tough 2024. That collectively seems like the consensus, but just from what we're seeing with the advanced look on peak bookings, at least for our little section of the map, ADR looks healthy, occupancy looks healthy. And what I really like is that we have normalized is the popular term, but we have a more normal baseline of rate and occupancy to work with now. We don't have this skewed data. And so I think that's really going to provide for a positive outcome in terms of maybe ADR, but more so occupancy. So I really feel positive moving into I'm looking forward to moving into 2025, but I feel really positive so far with what we're seeing on ADR, with what we're seeing and how that complements occupancy too. So I'm looking forward to, from that perspective, a much healthier year. Hopefully we can kind of hone in on the service that we've talked about and make sure that as occupancy potentially goes up, that we don't forget about the service aspect. But I feel cautiously optimistic. I think there's a lot of positives in our favor for the next year with rates and occupancy.
Amen. Well, Chris, this is a great way to wrap the episode. I truly enjoy this. I think the conversation around guest experience and all that was actually way more refreshing for me than probably expected. I was like, I'm ready to geek out about business, but actually that was a fun topic. But Chris, there's so much in the industry, kind of doom and gloom and all this other stuff. Like you said, like 2024 was kind of a rough year. But just to hear your optimistic outlook and just maybe cautiously as much as you said, but it's still nice to hear. And I think this conversation is really enlightening for people getting ready for the holiday season too. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to be on the pod and to share a little bit about your story and just the way you're looking at things as you guys are growing Scenic Stays and really just like tuning in or dialing up the guest experience. I think it's really cool and kind of a refreshing take. So I just want to say thank you for being on the show and for sharing all your insights and your thoughts.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It was great conversation. And what can I say? The Christmas spirit just overtakes you,
The Christmas spirit. You listen to Christmas music already over there in Florida?
I mean, if it were appropriate to have the decor up, it already would be. It's we don't have winter really. We don't have winter like you, so we've got to make it our own. So it's as winter as it's going to get here.
I love it. Well, I expect to hear a little bit of Mariah Carey next time we jump into a podcast together. Get a little, maybe some Santa Baby going on. I don't know. Whatever holiday music people like these days. I try not to listen until after Thanksgiving, but it's kind of hard to avoid. Random tangent. But for the last final question I ask every guest is for the listeners, where can they find you if they want to connect, if they want to reach out or even just follow along with the journey that you're building along? Where can they go? What links in the show notes can we put?
Well, for the company, it's My Scenic Stays. You can take a look at our inventory there. I'm on LinkedIn as Chris Wheeler, or you can shoot me an email anytime. So I'm happy to connect with anybody however they'd like to. So those are probably the easiest avenues. We're on social as well, but I'd love if everybody take a look at the website and give us feedback too. Tell us how the experience is on the site.
All right. Careful what you
Yeah,
wish
I
for,
know.
Chris. Careful what you wish for. You got 1.5 million listeners every year on the show. They're about to blow up your website. Just kidding. No, it's really good. I will make sure that all the links are in the show notes for all the Slick Talk listeners right now who are curious, learning more about Scenic Stays, about Chris, all the stuff that we've covered in today's episode. So you know what to do. Make sure you like and subscribe to all things Scenic Stays, Chris Wheeler. Give them the support as much as you give me and making this show the best show that we can. So, Chris, thank you so much again for joining me. And Slick Talkers, we'll see you guys all again next week.
Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Wil Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.